Hi, and welcome to our second lecture on Chapter 2. We're starting with a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "Each time we face our fear, we gain strength, courage, and confidence in the doing." And that's a lot of what this class is about, is facing our fears. So welcome to the journey. Erik Erikson, and yes, his parents named him Erik Erikson, is a really important theorist in the field of psychology. He started talking about the stages of psychosocial development after Freud talked about the stages of psychosexual development. And many people of the time thought Freud was overemphasizing sex, and we will talk about why that is later. But Erik Erikson came up with this idea that we're very influenced by our interactions with other people, and that's our social context of our life. And his thinking actually is pretty well accepted by most people in psychology, and not too many theorists can say that people aren't ready to criticize and discard your thinking. So Erik Erikson has had a lasting effect on psychology. What I want you to do is think about how you did in each one of these stages. And I'm going to talk about them separately. So you're not going to remember how you were from infant to 18 months or 18 months to 3 years. Most people's memories don't kick in until about 3 years old. That's why we say don't do anything great for your kid before they're 3 because they won't remember it. Well, that's not very nice because, of course, they're enjoying it in the moment. So, of course, you should do great things for them. Now, he refers to this psychosocial crisis. I'm not so sure that it's an actual crisis for you, but developing trust is pretty important because living in your life with mistrust is very uncomfortable and damaging to your relationships. So on this side of the versus sign is all the good stuff that we come out with. And on this side is all the problematic things that people come out with. So this lasts from infant to 65 and older. So this is covering our entire lifespan. And you've probably heard of and might have even used the term inferiority complex. And that is right here. In 5 to 13 years, having an inferiority complex, Erik Erikson's the one that came up with that term and that idea. So we'll go through each one of these stages and break them down piece by piece. And I want you again, think about where you were successful or where maybe you were challenged, because again, the title of our chapter is Who Am I? And think about if you were challenged or you feel challenged today, for example, to trust people. Where did that come from and what can you do about it? Also, I'd like you to remember this idea, and it's always available to you at your fingertips on your phone. When you are dealing with someone who has some problems, they have an inferiority complex, they seem overrun by guilt, they don't seem to grow, they seem like a loner, they seem unhappy. Maybe you can explain to yourself why they might be that way. Now, I'm not saying go to them, tell them about Erik Erikson, solve their problem. But I'm saying the more that you understand people and their story, the less stressed you are by their actions. And I am all for being less stressed about human interaction. Okay. Who am I? How'd you do during each one of these stages? That's the question. Okay, trust versus mistrust. Actually, I really like my other slide better. Let's just go back to that one. Okay, so infant to 18 months, trust versus mistrust. Erikson says that your caregivers, and whoever they were, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, babysitter, foster care, I don't know, nursery, whoever took care of you was there supposedly to meet your needs. And as an infant to 18 months, you need food, water, air, shelter, not to be too cold, not to be too hot, and to get cuddled. If your needs are met, you develop this sense of trusting in the world. If your needs are not met, you might experience mistrust. And I hope that it's hard for any of you to imagine an infant to 18 months not being well cared for, not having all of their very simple needs met. You know, I could add to that comfort when you're crying, but the comfort is in terms of, do you need food, water, air, your diaper changed? Are you too cold, too hot? And do you need some cuddling? Okay, so maybe we'll add discomfort into that. If you have diaper rash, or you've just been laying there too long and you miss, it's a good idea to cry and get some attention so that you make sure that your needs are met. It's hard to imagine anyone not doing that, I know, but I'll tell you one of my cases. So I worked with a couple who had had their children taken away from them and put into care of professionals because they had a newborn baby, 4 weeks old, and they had a 1-year-old, and they assumed that they would just sleep out in the car while the parents went into a bar and partied. They had no idea that anything else would happen. The babies should just be out there sleeping. So they would leave them out there for hours and hours and hours and get wasted and then drive home. One time, somebody found those kids crying alone in a locked car in the parking lot and called the cops. And the cops broke in, got the kids, got the identities of the people by going into the bar and said, "This is not okay. This is not the way you take care of kids." So the parents were sent to me because they needed to understand the needs of children if they wanted to have those kids back. And they did want their kids back, so they were willing to do some parenting classes and to try to understand that they probably both needed to go to treatment for alcoholism and drug addiction. So the baby and the 1-year-old were left alone for hours and hours from they would start partying around 6 and they'd stay in there until the bar closed, till around 2. So you can imagine that the diapers needed to be changed and lots of other needs were happening during that time. So you can imagine the kids had lots and lots of hours, and this was every night, of being basically abandoned. It's logical that you would develop mistrust in the world if that's the way you're being treated. Now, of course, I totally understand that my example is extreme, but I use the extreme example to make the point. You can probably also imagine other situations where people have not met the needs of kids this age, and the kids have been crying, or they give up and they learn to be helpless and they stop crying and they give up and they feel like no one's going to come and help take care of them. So now that's what's happening to the babies. Now what's happening to you as an adult? If you have trust, great. It's peaceful for you to get into a relationship, whether it's at work, whether it's intimate, whether it's family relationships. You are not waiting for people to let you down. Whereas if you develop mistrust during this time, that's exactly what you would be waiting for, is for people to let you down. So you'd be suspicious of them, and possibly some of you may be controlling, or you have met someone who is controlling. And it's at this point in class that I would say, okay, so who's had a really controlling boyfriend or girlfriend? And about 70% of the class raises their hand. So I say, what was that like? And students will say, well, my boyfriend was texting me all the time going, what are you doing? What are you wearing? Who are you talking to? Or my girlfriend always drives by my work and makes sure my car is there. Or she drives by the house when I say I'm just home, just to make sure that I'm home. Or when they get together with their significant other, they say things like, what have you been doing? Who did you talk to? Why'd you go there? How come you were there that long? Why didn't you respond to my text? Why didn't you call me on your break? All of those kinds of interrogation kinds of questions. Now, people, as you listen to this, is that you? Are you the interrogator? Do you have a hard time trusting people? If so, this is your chance to make a significant difference in your life. Please consider going over to the Student Center and making an appointment on the second floor for personal counseling and talk about that you have a hard time trusting others. It makes you suspicious and controlling. Okay? Please consider doing that, because if I were to ask the class, they would say, yeah, and I broke up with that person because I couldn't stand it. I actually loved the person, but I couldn't handle the way they were so controlling. So it's very, very hard to be in a relationship with someone who's like that. It's very hard for you to be in a relationship when you are always worrying about the faithfulness of a friend or a lover. So this part is one of the most significant things in our psychosocial development. Can we develop trust? So just pause for a minute and think about how this affected you. And you can always hit the pause button and journal or think about these things. Okay, we'll move on to the next stage, about 18 months, about a year and a half to 3 years. Now you're going to notice that what we call the terrible twos is in there, and here's why. The kid is developing autonomy. What's autonomy? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's right. Autonomy is a good thing. It's developing some independence from total dependence on your caregiver. You can't do a darn thing for yourself until you're at least a year and a half. And then you might be able to put your toys away. You might be able to feed yourself. You're still pretty dependent until it comes to be around 2. So your goal in life is to become autonomous. You start saying, I do it. No, let me do it. And you start saying you want to put certain clothes on. You start saying you want to play with certain things. And you start saying, I want to feed myself and I definitely don't want to eat that. And you say no and you throw the food off your high chair. That strength is developing. That is showing you are becoming a person. You are saying, this is who I am. I have likes and dislikes. I have preferences. This is important to me. I want to do this. I don't want to do that. You're becoming who we eventually know you to be, who you are today. The challenge with that is, again, social development. If whoever's taking care of you says, no, 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 you can't do that. No, bad boy. No, bad girl. And stops you from developing this autonomy, you start to feel like you are not capable of handling life. You start to feel like your ideas are bad and that you can't do anything for yourself. You have to let somebody else take care of you. If that happens, if you have a pretty controlling parent, like you say, I want to climb up in my high chair, and you start to climb and they say no, and grab you and put you in the high chair and throw the little seat belt around you and slam the tray on the front, then you start to think, oh, wow, that was a bad idea that I wanted to do that, and I guess I'm helpless. Little kids at this time start to want to do everything for themselves. They want to climb into their own car seat, climb into their own high chair, pick the toys they want to play with. And if we let them have some autonomy while keeping them safe, I'm not saying that these are free-range children we're talking about, but if they say they want to go outside and we say, no, maybe later. And we don't mean maybe later. We're too busy to let them have preferences. We want them to fit into our world instead of adapting our world to theirs. There's going to be problems. And adults who have shame and doubt have a lot of what we call baggage, and they're severely compromised. So we'll pick up there on our next video. Bye.